Here we go. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to just do a little bit of upkeep and points before we turn it over to our guest speaker tonight. For those of you guys who might be on our YouTube stream and don't know who I am, my name is Andy Ball. I'm the director of vocal music here at Corona Del Mar High School, which is where you are zooming into. This is my whiteboard right here. And welcome to our very first Finding Our Voice talk of our speaker series. The goal of the Finding Our Voice speaker series is to spur conversations about inclusion in the world of vocal music, and we are thrilled to have Miss Eliza Rubenstein here to kick that off with a conversation about women in music. Before I turn it over to her, just some information about our upcoming events. This Friday at 7 p.m. on our YouTube channel, we're going to be doing our Social Distance Symphony and fundraising drive. We're going to be featuring a curated selection of past performances from the before 4 times when we could actually perform for each other, and we'll have some live soloists performing as well. That's Friday at 7. And then 2 weeks from today is our second speaker, which is Stacey Gibbs, one of the most performed arrangers of African-American spirituals currently living. And he'll be leading a conversation on spirituals and their impact on current happenings in our country. If you feel motivated to donate to our program, the link is in the description of the video that you are watching if you're on YouTube. And if you have any questions, we do have members of our leadership team monitoring both the chat in the webinar here on Zoom, but also the discussion happening on our live stream on YouTube. So even if you're not a member of the CDM Vocal Music family, you're welcome to bring questions to our speakers. And if you would like to ask your question out loud, if you're attending here on Zoom, I believe you have the option to raise your hand virtually, and we'll be able to turn on your microphone. And you'll be able to ask Eliza directly. With that, I'd like to welcome our guest. Eliza Rubenstein is going to be speaking tonight on the topic of women in music. She is the director of choral and vocal activities at Orange Coast College and is the artistic director of the OC Women's Chorus and Long Beach Chorale. She is also the editor of Cantate. Is that right? Is that your position? Okay. The editor of Cantate, which is a magazine that covers the California choral music world. And she also has adjudicated many of the festivals that we've held here at CDM and is one of our favorite clinicians to work with. So we are thrilled to welcome her back, even if it's in a virtual matter. And thank you so much for being here.
I'm really excited. I don't think you've ever gotten Long Beach Chorale right on the first try before, Mr. Ball. I'm pretty impressed by you. That's really good. Hi, everybody. It's weird not being able to see you. And sorry, my lighting is a little weird here today. And I have pets. And my cat might make an appearance, and you can probably hear him. So sorry about that. Women in music is obviously a really, really huge topic. And an hour is not certainly going to get us to any point of a completion on it, but we can at least start asking some of the right questions, I think, and thinking about how this affects us and how we can affect the question of where women fit into the world of classical music, of vocal and choral music. So I thought, just for fun, we would start with a little quiz, and I'm going to share my screen. While I do that, in your chat, make sure that you're set, if you're open to it, to all panelists and attendees, so that when I ask you to put some things in the chat, we can all see it, okay? And I'm gonna share a little PowerPoint here, and hope that it gets big when I click it. There we go. All right, so my subtitle here is Women in Music, a Conversation in One Quiz and X Annoying Facebook Comments. I had a number in there, and then I thought, well, maybe we're gonna add some more as we go if we have time. So we'll start with the quiz. And again, if you can set it so that you can, maybe you can't see the chat actually. Can you? Tell you what, let me take it off that, and then we can maybe see each other's chat. No, I don't think we can. Okay, well, whatever. That was a bad idea. I guess I didn't practice this.
I can see the chat. They're pretty savvy on Zoom. They can probably figure it out.
You can? Okay, because I can't see anything except my screen. So that's good. You'll have to tell me what some of the guesses are as we go here. Okay.
Sure thing.
First quiz question. In what year in the United States were women legally guaranteed the right to have a credit card or a mortgage in their own name? Meaning not requiring their husband's consent. Oh, there's my chat. No, I still can't see it.
We've got 1974, 1967, 1975, 1964, 1975, 1977. I think
these are pretty good guesses. Now, I don't know if that seems like ancient history to all of you, The correct answer is 1974. Now think about this. Most of your parents were probably alive by then or were about to be alive by then. Certainly your grandparents were. I was. Mr. Ball was not. Not until 1974 could women have their own credit card necessarily. Now, if you could get a credit card company to give you one, great, you were lucky. But if they said, no, you're not married, or no, not without your husband's permission, you had no legal recourse. That was up to them to be able to say that. So yeah, 1974, not that long ago. Here's another one for you. Good guesses. In what year did it become illegal to fire a woman for becoming pregnant?
We have 2002, 2000, 1976, 2002, 1980, 2003, 1999, late 1970s, 2002.
These are great. It's interesting that that range is so wide.
1990.
Actually, that happened in 1978, which again, you know, compared to some of your guesses may seem like, oh gosh, that's way better than I thought, but still not very long ago, right? So within my lifetime, within most of your parents' lifetime, it was perfectly legal to fire a woman for getting pregnant, which, as you can imagine, could have a huge impact on the entire life path and career path of a given employee. Okay, you're doing great at this. Here's another question for you. Got a couple more of these. In what year were women allowed to attend every Ivy League university?
1998, 1950, 1995, 2000, 2001, 1976.
Again, a really great, interesting range of guesses. Correct answer, 1983. Now, you could start applying to Ivies as a woman in about 1968, 1969. Yale was the first one to go, but not until 1983 did the last one become co-ed. Why is that important? Well, you know, for decades before that, the Ivy League, as it is still today, rightly or wrongly, was considered sort of the gold standard of education. If you really, really wanted to set yourself apart from the rest of the world, you get an Ivy League education, except that for decades and decades, you couldn't do that unless you were a man. And having spoken with a number of the women who were the first women to go to various Ivies, I can also tell you in those early years, probably to an extent still today, they didn't have the same experience as the men. You can probably imagine. All right, I think I've got one more, maybe two more. In what year did it become illegal to charge women more than men for the same health insurance?
1890. 1999, not yet.
Any other guesses?
1952, 1960, 1996.
These are great guesses. The correct answer for this one, not until 2010.
Oh,
and that's a mistake. I mistyped that. It's not, that was not the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. That was a different act, but it did not happen until 2010. So again, not that long ago. Like everyone here remembers 2010, I'm pretty sure. So very, very recently. I think there's one more. In what year did women in Michigan gain the legal right to get a haircut without their husband's consent?
2019, 1980, 1968, 1923, 1934, 1983, 2000, 1977, 1985, 2001, 1980.
Would you believe? Not yet.
Oh my God.
We're still waiting on that one. Now, are you going to walk into a Supercuts in Detroit and have your haircut denied because your husband didn't consent to it? No, it's not a law that's enforced, but there is something really symbolically powerful about the fact that it still exists, and that legally your husband, if you are female, could still tell you in Michigan, no, I don't want you to have that haircut, and you would lose in court probably if you tried to challenge that. So what's the point of all of that? And what does any of this have to do with music is the next question. And, you know, I've given a lot of talks and written a lot of articles about women in music over the years. And the longer I do it, the broader and broader the subject matter gets, because the older I get, the more I realize We can't talk about women in this corner of the world, or women in this profession, or women in this niche without talking about the status of women in society as a whole. It simply doesn't work that way. I can't see you, so I can't ask you to raise your hands, but have any of you read Virginia Woolf's book, A Room of One's Own, either on your own or as part of your English classes? I don't know how I'll know if you say yes or no. If you have, great. If you haven't, I would encourage you strongly to do so. Probably if I personally had to name the single book that changed my life more than any other, that would be it. It's a little tiny book. It's like 100 pages of big type, and it will change your life. Virginia Woolf was a wonderful novelist and essayist who lived around the turn of the 20th century. And A Room of One's Own was a book that she made out of some talks that she gave, kind of like this, except without Zoom, when she was asked to talk about women and writing fiction. And the people who asked her to write these talks expected that she was going to talk about, what subject matter women like to write novels about, or what writing practices could help women write better fiction. And instead, she gave them a series of talks about how women were never going to be able to write fiction or anything else at the same level as men until women were guaranteed to have two things. The first was a regular income. The amount that she set on it was £500 a year. That was England 100 plus years ago. If you do the exchange rate, and if you adjust for inflation, she was talking about roughly $40,000 a year. The second thing she said women need in order to write as well as men do, and as successfully and as consistently as men do, is a room of their own. Just those two things. She never really talked, not directly, about talent. She didn't really talk even about education, although she did speak about how, she spoke a great deal about how striking it was that the quality of education at men's colleges versus that at women's colleges, because they were pretty much all separated at that point, how different those two were. And she said, until women have financial independence and a place of their own, they're never going to be the creative powers that men are. Cannot happen. This was a book, as I said, that absolutely changed the course of my life and made me begin to think globally about issues that to that point had only been local micro issues in my mind. And I think that we can apply a lot of these same principles to the music world as well. I'm gonna unscreen share for a second, just because I feel weird. In the book, A Room of One's Own, one of the really famous passages is the part where Virginia Woolf talks about William Shakespeare's sister. She tells the story of Shakespeare's sister, who was about the same age as Will Shakespeare, who was similarly very talented as a writer and had similar passions for theater and acting and same dreams of being a playwright. But she says, whereas William Shakespeare got education and got encouragement and got financial support and remuneration for his work, his sister, whose name was Judith, was basically laughed at. She didn't get an education. She never had a place to work in private where it was quiet, where she could concentrate. The only room that she had in the house where she was expected to be was the kitchen or the washroom, where she did the laundry. Ultimately, William Shakespeare went on to become incredibly famous for, centuries after his death, whereas his sister Judith died pretty much in obscurity. Nobody knew her name. She didn't get a fancy grave site. She didn't have anything. Now here's the twist, two twists actually. The first twist is there was no Judith Shakespeare, or if there was, we don't know anything about her because she died as an infant. So the story that Virginia Woolf tells about her is itself fiction. It's a story that Virginia Woolf made up to make a point. But here's the other thing that really strikes me, and you can use your chat here again if you like, because you might know who I'm talking about. There is, in the music world, a story that is so strikingly similar to that fictitious one. It's a real story that is so similar to the fictitious one of William and Judith Shakespeare that it almost gives me chills. There is a famous composer who had an equally talented sister who was simply never given the same encouragement or the same resources or the same space in which to develop her talent. Anybody happen to know who that was? Oh, Zipporah is the student teacher, isn't she? No wonder so smart.
That's Cal State Fullerton Strong right there.
I love it. Well done. All right. Mozart is an excellent guess, by the way. Mozart did have a sister who was extremely talented. And that's a completely valid guess. I think the story of Fanny Mendelssohn and her brother Felix is an even more striking parallel to the story of William and Judith Shakespeare. In short, if you probably know about Felix Mendelssohn, right? You've probably sung some of his music. And even if you don't know that you know Felix Mendelssohn's music, you do. You've heard some of it. You've heard his wedding march. Right? Lots of people love Mendelssohn. He's still, 200 years after he lived, is still one of the most famous and most performed composers of all of the great classical artists. His sister, when they were just a few years apart in age, when they were young, they came from a very wealthy, very academically and artistically oriented family. And when they were young, they both went to music school. And their teachers thought that Fanny was actually more talented than Felix was. But by the time they both reached 18, 20 years of age, Felix was the one who was encouraged to go out and have a great career and be famous and be a conductor and be a composer. Fanny was told, okay, this has been fun for a few years. This has been a great way to spend your time and, occupy your brain. But now you're a woman. You're not a girl anymore. This is a hobby for you. Women don't get to do this as a profession. It's simply not allowed. And one of the things that always strikes me as incredibly sad about this story is that her brother, her father, the very people who were, specifically and deliberately telling her, you cannot do this for a living, were the same people who had encouraged her. They loved her more than anyone else in the world loved her. They loved her deeply. It was not that they didn't like her. They weren't trying to hold her back. They were simply following the traditions of their society, of their culture that said this isn't done. So we'll never really know what she might have been as a composer. She is Judith Shakespeare. She did die young and frustrated, and always in a position of having to support her brother's work far more than she was ever encouraged to nurture her own creativity and her own talent. And I think that's just one of the saddest what could have been stories in the history of all of music. So I think about her a lot. I think about the fictional Judith Shakespeare and the real Fanny Mendelssohn, and they are both kind of guiding lights to me in my life and in my career as I think about what do we do to solve, well, I'll put this in very personal terms. I have a real conflict internally that I've had for decades now, that I am this incredible, raging, equality-minded, woman power kind of person, and Black Lives Matter and LGBT rights and all of that, working in a profession that has been so dominated by one kind of person for so long, right? The music that I grew up living with and loving and wanting to make my career doing, probably 98% of it was by white men. I want to be very clear. I like white men. I like the music they write. I've got no problem with white men. I have a big problem with the fact that the classical music world has been so completely controlled and dominated by just one narrow demographic for so long. So I spend a lot of my days wrestling with that contradiction. What do I do about the fact that my favorite music is all by one kind of person? And how do I make it so that the people who come after me don't necessarily have to have that same conflict inside them? So I don't know if all these periods in the chat mean something or that I'm supposed to be responding to. And if so, somebody just interrupt me, okay? Because I'm going now. So what I thought I would do is, since our time is limited today, I'm not scared. I'm a little bit scared. No, I'm curious. Mostly I'm intrigued is what I am. Like I said, because I have a love-hate relationship with social media, among other things, I thought I would frame our discussion today in terms of Facebook comments that have irritated me in my time as a participant in lots of different Facebook groups for choral directors and other classical musicians. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. Yeah, okay. All right, annoying Facebook comment number 1. Let's just start with the big one here. Why do you have to make everything so political? I do music to get away from politics. I get that. And certainly these last, especially the last few years, I think we have all been so inundated with political chaos so much of the time. And that's regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, but it's really, really hard to avoid it. And I think that it's very natural and very defensible to say, I don't want all this politics in my music. Like I didn't get into choir to be an activist, right? I got into choir because I just loved singing music together. This is another debate that I have in my own head a lot. That's why I got into choir too, because I really liked how choral music sounded, and I wanted to get deeper into it, and I wanted to see what it felt like to conduct a choir. And that still is the part that, most viscerally motivates me. That's the part that most immediately goes to my soul and my heart. But my brain can't ignore that problem that we identified a moment ago, which is that this world that I fell in love with is a world that has for centuries been extremely exclusive and exclusionary. And I'm not okay with that. So part of enjoying choral music for me now, same as with enjoying just about anything else in life, I don't enjoy it as much if I don't feel like it's equally available to everybody else that I care about too. I don't want to have fun doing something that other people can't do at the same time. Unless they can't sing, then I don't want them. But if they're, I don't want them excluded or feeling excluded because of who they are, where they came from, what they look like, all of that stuff. And I would also say, in an even broader sense, this idea, and this is, I'm digressing just a little bit here, but I think it's important. All of you probably fall at slightly different places on the spectrum of political engagement, political interest, political opinions. And you probably know some people, as I do, who are like, well, I'm not interested in politics. I don't do politics. And I would only say, like, politics does you. Politics is interested in you. Politics down deep, etymologically, if you look at where we get that word from, it refers to the city, the community. Politics is how we as a population make decisions about how we want to live together as the community. So to be uninterested in politics, well, that's okay, but politics is still going to affect how you live. And how others around you live. So our choice isn't really to be involved in politics or not. Our choice is just, do we want to have a voice in how our communities and our culture interacts with each other? So that's my answer to people. Like, which is not to say that we don't have the right to just get away from it all and listen to music and not think about all of that stuff. I have lots of playlists that I use for that, in all different genres. Like, when I'm listening to the B minor Mass, most of the time, all I'm doing is absorbing the genius of the music of Bach. I'm not necessarily thinking at every moment, how do we make this more equitable, more accessible? How do we bring this music to more people? But I do have those conversations. I also spend a lot of time just like rocking out to top 40 hits of the 1980s. And same thing. It's not that we can't give ourselves permission just to enjoy music for music's sake. But I do think that if we want to be responsible citizens of the music world, we owe it to ourselves and moreover to other people to have a broader interest in that too. Mr. Ball, you should tell me if at any point you think I ought to stop for Q&A or if you want me to keep powering through and leave that till the end, because I'm open.
I'm loving this right now. Keep going.
Okay, then I will click to the next annoying Facebook comment. Oh God, I've seen this one so many times. Gender and race shouldn't matter when we're programming music for our concerts. The only thing I care about is the quality of the music. All right, I'm gonna unshare for a minute so we can go back to seeing each other in the chat too. Because this is probably, Mr. Ball, you've probably seen this too. Wow, I have seen this comment or variations of it so many times. And it often comes up when somebody has the nerve on one of these like Facebook choral groups. They'll say like, I'm looking for a piece for SATB on the topic of, you know, clowns. And I'd really like it to be written by a woman composer. Oh my gosh, there will always be someone who will come out of the woodwork to say, well, I don't care about who wrote my music. I think the only thing that matters is the quality of the music. And they always, I'm pretty sure they always type it in that tone of voice because they never frame it as a confession. It's always a point of pride. Is that what the periods mean? That's so cool. I love that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, they're like
Thank
snaps.
you, Sonia.
Like
I did not know that bit of Zoom lingo. I'm still, I guess, getting used to our new world. But thank you.
New to me too. I found out yesterday what POG means, which is what they've been putting in the chat. So don't let that scare you either. It's a gamer term.
What's it mean?
It's a reference to a specific like reaction picture of like a well-known Twitch streamer.
Oh my gosh. There's a whole world out there that like I spend a lot of time online and I'm like pretty up to date with various kinds of social media, but I am so not a gamer. That's like one digital addiction that I have never gotten into. So that you just taught me a new word and now I'm seeing it a lot. Wow.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you. That's excellent. What were we talking about? Oh, the people who say, well, all I care about is quality. So let's take a moment and talk about quality. What does that mean? Somebody, feel free, all of you, feel free, stick in the chat here, how, in musical terms, if you're, you know, let's say you get to pick a piece of music that you're gonna do in choir, virtual choir, real choir, doesn't matter, and you want it to be of high quality. What does that mean?
We've got Sean saying just good vibes in general.
I saw that.
Notes that sound good together.
Okay, it should not sound like crap, right?
So, rich harmonies.
Rich harmonies, okay. That's my cat, sorry. She has opinions. Good piece of music, sounds good, good meaning representative, okay, good. Authentic, good words, beautiful harmonies, great. Okay, good. Where in the traditional choral world, and remembering that you all are probably more hip and more diverse than the usual choral conductor community by quite a lot. Hog song, somebody needs to write that. Where have we gotten our standards of what represents quality in music? Also, where did they come from?
From the YouTube channel, just to share, because it's an old fan of yours. Allison Zema says, whatever it means something different to every person.
Good. Thanks, Allison. Where did these definitions of quality arise? Where were they born? Whose are they? Did we come up with them just completely organically by ourselves with no outside influences?
We've got men, question mark, white, male, European.
Yeah.
Probably men, immaculate.
Probably men, yeah. Most, not all, most of our professions, I'm going to speak on behalf of the choral profession as a whole, not any of you individually, but it is still the case that most of our sense of what represents quality music, especially like highbrow music, you know, like serious music, comes from the white male European tradition. It's, you know, the standard, the benchmark against which we measure music in many ways is still Mozart, still Bach, still Beethoven. And I want to say again, and I'll say this again before we're done, love those guys, They are the reason I'm here. Love them, love them, love them. Nothing wrong with those guys. But again, they represent such a small sliver of what the music of the world and the sung music of the world has been for all these centuries. And we need to acknowledge, it's not that those standards can't be useful. They are. But we need to remember at all times whose they are and where they came from. And remember that for literal centuries, the arbiters, the judges of what is quality music were men. They were white men. Again, doesn't mean they were necessarily wrong, just means that their perspective was necessarily limited because there were not very many other voices saying, hey, in my culture or in my experience, here's some other things that can contribute to what we count as quality. Even today, we have sort of different levels, I think, that as choral directors, we tend toward. And by the way, if you're all thinking like, I don't think this doesn't seem right to me, that is because you have an awesome director. That is because you have a director who thinks hard about all this stuff and is, a decade ahead of most of the profession in these areas. So some of this, maybe I'm asking you to take a bit of a leap of faith because, and Mr. Ball can attest that he and I are not necessarily like the norm always. A lot of our profession is still very stuck on, but I don't, all of this stuff is so new and so different. I don't think I like this. Or even when they are open to diverse repertoire, things that really are different, sort of out of the, the term canon, the choral canon of sort of accepted masterworks. It's in the sense of, this will be a nice little bit of flavor to go with our serious music. It's not, hey, maybe this is its own kind of serious music and high quality music. So the quality obsessed people I find are often not looking all that critically at where their sense of quality originated from. Because in order to do that, they would have to rethink a lot of assumptions. And we all know that rethinking assumptions is incredibly time consuming and energy consuming and often uncomfortable. And not everybody enjoys doing that. Let's, by the way, because I think I didn't put this in I originally put this in a separate annoying comment, but hang on, I'm gonna make sure that I'm not lying to you. Yeah, okay. I think you would find too, if there are any of you who are, I know there are some of you who are already choral directors and there are others of you who will be choral directors or other kinds of conductors or music leaders of different sorts, you will find these same sort of gender and race issues in terms of the quality of your conducting. And I don't know, for example, I don't want to put you on the spot, Sephora, but maybe you've had experiences like that being a female conductor. Allison is not on the Zoom, I think, but she probably could speak to that as well. I know that in my career, and I don't deal with this probably as much as some people do for various reasons, but I have definitely gotten a lot of, well, you just don't look like a conductor to me. Or like, really? You're going to direct that whole orchestra? Which I just find hilarious. Like, yeah, my arms work. Why wouldn't I direct the whole orchestra? Do you think that like when a woman walks to the podium, like only the first violins do what she says? I don't really get that. Sephora, do you want to talk about that?
Hello, I'm in my kitchen. I too have huge goals to one day be a university director or like, who knows, direct a professional ensemble of sorts. Everyone's kind of like, well, you're a young woman from Orange County. Why you? It's definitely jolting for them. And it's like, I didn't mean to offend you by my statement. It's nothing personal. I hope you have your own huge aspirations. And that's what mine is. It's an aspiration that I hope to achieve at some point in my career. And it doesn't make me more than you or anything. It just means that this is a goal that I hope to strive for in the future or now or better.
And have you encountered people, sorry, the cat was meowing and the cat will shut up if I put him in my lap. So we're gonna do that for now. This is Wilbur. Have you encountered people who just couldn't quite put their finger on like what it was about you that didn't seem conductor-like to them?
I hate to say it, but it's literally because I'm not a white man. it is, because there's nothing about the way I present myself or my knowledge or my education. Like it's very much comparable to anyone else. It's just because I'm a woman, a young woman.
Yeah. Thank you. Again, sorry for putting you on the spot, but thank you so much for agreeing to be put on it. Yeah, like I said, I've gotten fewer comments like that than a lot of people I know, partly just because I don't know, I just kind of, I think I project a certain amount of like, I don't care what you think off the bat anyway, but I've had people say like, you're just such a little thing. Like, what? You're a conductor, really? And that, or not for me, but for other people I know, there's definitely stereotypes of like, well, you just conduct like a woman. Well, what does that mean? Or a lot of time there's this sense that like female conductors are too floaty and emotional, and they're not clear enough. And if you're a woman in this profession, like, you'll deal with some of that. You absolutely will. And a lot of that too comes from the same place as the quality issue. Like, well, what makes someone a good conductor? Is it how they look on the podium, or is it the results that they get from their ensemble? Related, let me go back to screen sharing. For those who are asking, Wilbur was named primarily after the poet Richard Wilbur, who's one of my favorite Wilburs, but like the Wilbur from Charlotte's Web is also really, really cool. So he wouldn't mind being named after him also. All right, going back to this. All right, annoying Facebook comment number, whatever we're on, 3. Women who wear, insert whatever clothing here when they're performing, are so distracting. You just don't look like a serious musician when you dress like that. Here's another, I mean, think about this. And I'll give you a personal example. When the first time after I got my job at Orange Coast College, the first time that we went to a choral festival, this was like 10 years ago, and we were there were like, maybe 8 or 9 different choirs. There was one other female conductor besides me, the rest were men. And when we went to dinner afterwards to, in part, discuss all the different choirs that we'd heard and seen and what we thought of them and everything, what we learned from them. And my wonderful students, who are terrific, incredible people, when we got to the choir that was directed by the woman, they all immediately identified it as like, well, the one with the woman in the whatever dress. And if you are a female conductor, I can guarantee you've had the experience of conducting a concert and, being at the reception or whatever afterwards and having everyone come up to you and immediately talk about what you're wearing. In a way, I get it, because here we'll go back to being chattable. Sorry, I see that Wilbur's creating a disturbance in the force. Bad cat. There's a dog here too. If you're all really nice to me, I'll show you the dog at the end too, because he's cute. I don't know what I'm talking about. What do men wear when they conduct? What do like 98% of men wear when they conduct an orchestra or a choir? Specifically, what kind of suit? Yeah, okay, there we go.
Tuxedo.
Yeah, generally a tuxedo. So this is another thing that we're not even really talking about music here, right? What we're talking about is the fact that in our society, there is this accepted formal uniform for men. And it's kind of understood that, like, I mean, think about this in your own life, the guys that you know. Like, is there any guy in your life who doesn't look really like their best and awesome in a tuxedo? Pretty much every guy looks great in a tuxedo, or looks as great as they're gonna look, right? Nobody makes tuxedos for women. There is no universally accepted uniform for women that says, this is me at my formal best, right? Which, a lot of the guys may be sitting there thinking like, yeah, it must be nice. We'd like to have some choices too. You're right. Patriarchy hurts all of us when it puts us into little boxes like this. For women, there's sort of 2 ways you can go. One is you can wear a tuxedo, or you can wear a suit. And then what's everyone going to say? Feel free to put it in the chat. What are they going to say to you after the concert if you, a woman, conducted in a tuxedo? Exactly. You look like a man. Why are you dressing like a man? Why are you not happy just to be a woman? Why did you wear a man's outfit? Which doesn't, I mean, I conduct in suits all the time, no problem. But I do get that comment. The other side of the coin, what if you wear like a beautiful dress? Then what comment do you get? I would always rather wear PJs. Yes, exactly. It's distracting, or it's too feminine, or it's too short, or it's too long, or I could see too much of your shoulders, or, you know, it's too low cut, or it's too sequiny, or whoa, I love your dress. Oh, right, there was a concert also. Yeah, then again, it just becomes about the outfit. And if you're wondering if I have a solution to this problem, the answer is no, I don't. But I do have a suggestion, which is I am looking to the men of our profession to diversify their outfits, to say, I don't necessarily want to wear a tuxedo every single time, or even a suit every time. I'm going to experiment with some different looks, because you know what that does? It makes people think less in terms of, well, that's what a conductor looks like, an old guy in a tuxedo. They start to think, oh, okay, that's also what a conductor looks like. Oh, a conductor can look like a guy in a wheelchair, or a woman in a dress, or a person of color wearing sequins. I don't know. For me, you know, this is one way to be an ally, is just to mix things up a little bit and destroy the stereotypes in small, harmless, but meaningful ways. So future male conductors, there's something for you to think about. You don't have to wear a tux every time. We're gonna run short on, no, I can tell this story really, really fast, because I just think it's so interesting. Okay, so my partner, her name is Julie, she's a veterinarian. And a few years ago, just purely by coincidence, I had a conductors conference in the same city outside of California where she had a veterinary conference. So we were staying in the same hotel. She was going to be going off to her conference later in the day, and we were staying in my conference hotel. So it was a hotel full of collegiate level choral conductors. Okay? Picture for a moment what most of them looked like. Okay. This is not about, you're not being bad to stereotype. You can picture what a lot of the collegiate choral profession looks like. It's older white men. Okay. That's who's there. It's not that that's the only person who's there, but there are a lot of them. Okay. So she went down to breakfast one morning. She was, I don't know how she was dressed, but she was, you know, she's in her 40s. She was at the hotel coffee shop with her laptop. She was writing medical records, sitting at a you know, big table or counter or something. And one of the conductors, one of the older male conductors from our conference, came and sat down a couple of seats away from her. And he looked at her and he went, I'll have coffee. And she said she was so taken aback that she did actually probably the best possible thing, which was she just looked up from her computer like, until he felt incredibly uncomfortable about the enormous set of assumptions that he had just made about her, based on nothing but the fact that he was thinking, okay, this hotel is full of conductors right now and she doesn't look like one of them, so I'm going to order coffee from her. And to his credit, he immediately caught himself, you know, after she gaped at him for a second, and he was like, I'm so sorry, sorry about that, I'll go order my own coffee. But that's the kind of, I mean, it's such a small thing, like it didn't ruin her day or anything, but we still laugh about that. And it's the way these stereotypes work in insidious. I'm sure y'all know the term microaggression. That's a microaggression. And we gotta be vigilant about that. And one of the ways we do that is just by continuing to mix up what our professions, what our world looks like, so that it's a lot harder to make those assumptions about people. Okay, sorry, that was a tangent. I'm going back now to this. Okay, here's an interesting one. Annoying Facebook comment number 4. My next concert theme is music by women. And you might be sitting there and thinking, wait a minute, you seem like someone who should love that, right? Like, you're here talking about mixing it up and representation and diversity. What is your problem? Are you never happy with anything? Because now here's someone who wants to do a concert of music by women and you're saying that that's annoying. What's wrong with that? A couple of you are starting to say stuff in the chat, and that's great. Keep it up. Ugh, sorry, I'll get the hair out of my mouth while you chat. Yeah, some good stuff starting to come in. So are you all familiar with the term ghettoizing? In its literal original sense, the ghetto, what was the ghetto?
To separate, reminds me of separate but equal, which isn't what the goal is.
Yeah, I see. What's a ghetto in its literal sense? Good. Okay, right. In especially the first part of the 20th century, it was specifically, you know, like in say a European city, the ghetto was the part of town where all the Jews lived. Okay, so they were there, but as several of you said, they're separate from everybody else. It's like, okay, we know you're here, but this is going to be your little cage that you stay in. So it's when you know, technically, like, is that city diverse? Yeah, you've got all your Jewish people there. But is it really diverse? No, because you're putting them all in a prescribed place rather than authentically, you know, mixing members of the population with each other and living together. So the term ghettoizing in art and culture these days means exactly that. It means you take your take the works of the, say, minority or marginalized people, and you put them in a neat little package. So, okay, here are my women composers. Here's my concert of music by women. It's a nice little sealed off package. And then I don't feel bad about the fact that for the rest of the year, I didn't program anything that was written by a woman or a person of color or whatever, you know, an LGBTQ composer, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe, a concert of music by women represented progress. And I don't want to, you know, dump on that. Because there was definitely a place for that and a time for that when it was important just to say, hey, by the way, everybody, women write music too. Here are some examples. But I think I hope that we're past that now. Have I done concerts of music by women? Yeah, but was that the only theme? No, because I think that's insulting. If the only thing tying the whole concert together is, look, a girl wrote this, I think that's a little insulting. I think it's a little infantilizing, like, oh, you all wouldn't have been good enough to get on the other concerts, but we're going to make a special one just for you. I think we can do better than that these days. It's harder because we have to work harder still to find music by underrepresented groups. And let's be really honest about that. Well, that's going to come up in the next slide too. It takes more work sometimes to find music by underrepresented composers, especially if you're like my generation or older and you never sang any of it when you were growing up in choir. Like, I didn't learn any music by women composers. Like, I literally can't think of a single decent piece of music by a woman that I sang in high school or college or, is this accurate? Grad school in my choirs, not one. So, you know, it took me some extra effort to go get to know that repertoire and then to work at authentically mixing it in with the rest, because separate but equal, as we know, is really not equal. All right, quick more screen share here. Let's make the choral world more equitable by not programming Beethoven and Bach and Brahms anymore. It is time for us to evolve. I've seen some comments like this from the like super woke members of our profession, people I really respect for the work that they're doing, pushing us forward and challenging us to do the work of becoming more just and more inclusive and more critical of the way our business has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years. But I come back here to my original problem of like, but that's the music I grew up really loving. Like, that's the stuff that made me want to do this in the first place. I can't just throw all that stuff out. And I think that's I think that's an important thing to discuss too. I am not someone, I don't have a quota system for my programming. I have done a lot of, let's say, my soul food, like the music I love best is the big choral orchestral repertoire, the Bach B minor mass, the Brahms Requiem, Mendelssohn, Eliza, the big 2-hour long pieces that cost a fortune to do and, take months and months to learn. That's the stuff I live for. And do you know how much of that is written by women or people of color? Not much. Does that mean I shouldn't do it? I don't want it to mean that. I've worked really, really hard to keep that stuff in my repertoire while diversifying, everything around it. I've worked hard in the positions where I can, where I have the funds, to try to commission less represented composers to write works that we can add to the repertoire for the future. But I've also, and I think this is equally important, I think we need to be honest about why there aren't great works of the past by women or by people of color. I don't think we need to say, hey, this, whatever piece is every bit as good as the Brahms Requiem, because it's not. Nothing's as good as the Brahms Requiem. The Brahms Requiem kicks ass. And women haven't written one of those yet. But guess what? Most men haven't either. In the course of hundreds of years, a small handful of men have produced a small handful of truly great enduring works. And it makes sense that people who never had the same opportunities, the Fanny Mendelssohns, who never got to finish their schooling and who never got encouraged to devote their time and their energy to being composers, who never got paid, God forbid, for their work, it's not surprising that they haven't turned out, a huge number of epic masterworks that lasted 500 years. It takes more than just talent. Talent is never enough. You have to, talent is great. And every once in a while, there will be some obscure genius who pops up and has has none of these advantages and still manages to do incredible things. That's awesome. But that's the exception to the rule. And you shouldn't have to be always the exception in order to be successful, in order to be encouraged, in order to be uplifted and supported in your talent and your creative endeavors. The more people we give those opportunities to, the more future B minor masses and Brahms Requiem type things we're going to have written by people who don't look like Beethoven or Bach or Brahms. And that's a world that I probably am not going to be alive to see much of, but it's a world that I want to do anything I can do while I am here to encourage for the future. So, quick back to my screen share. I just got, I think, one more slide. Hang on. Oh, wait, I blew it. I clicked the wrong thing. Okay, there. Oh, no, I did have one more. Sorry. Sexism is a thing of the past. Any woman who can't make it as a musician these days is just looking for excuses. We're running short on time, so can we just acknowledge that that's BS? Just as anyone who tells you that racism is a thing of the past or homophobia is a thing of the past, they're not living in reality. And they probably are, the people who say that are probably not members of the group that they're talking about being discriminated against, because, we can give ourselves a lot of credit for how far we've come and feel good about that while still acknowledging that we have a really long way to go. And certainly I've been part of a lot of those conversations this week in the wake of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who, by the way, had, an instrumental role in some of those quiz questions back at the beginning, like if you're a woman and you have your own credit card, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a big part of making that happen. We are still fighting some of those battles today, and we still got to fight them. And anyone who tells you that that battle's over isn't living in it. All right, so I know we were really short on time. Andrew, I don't know how strict your cutoff time is, and you can tell me to shut up at any moment. But just some really quick, what do we do? Mr. Ball, you want to weigh in?
I'd like to get them out by about 7 if we can, but I think that these are, the next steps are important because I think that you've raised so many important points that, frankly, make me angry every time people bring them up, because there's so many people that I respect that are being treated exactly the way that you said. But I think that we have people watching that aren't just students, but also other colleagues and things like that, who probably are very interested in knowing what we can do in order to help take steps in the right direction.
Thank you. So one thing I'll do is I'll put a link in the chat if someone reminds me so I don't forget, to a longer article that I wrote on this topic, that if anyone wants to read more, it gets more into the what can we do. It's specifically written for choral directors, and I'm happy to post a link to it. It's part of the magazine that I edit. So just a really quick, very general list of things that I think are important. One, question things. My guess is you're all pretty good at that already, and I already saw tons of evidence of that in the chat responses. Don't be afraid to say, wait a minute, just because we have always done it that way, is there a specific reason that we continue to do it that way? Or are we just beholden to a tradition that could maybe stand some updating and some diversifying and some rethinking? Hush. Sorry, Wilbur again. Number two, and this is so important, whether you are part of a marginalized group or an ally to a marginalized group, if you see an ism happening, call it out. Don't let that stuff go unchallenged. And I get into arguments with my friends about this because I'm like a total online warrior. And a lot of times people are like, why do you bother? You're not going to change that person's mind. And I'm like, it's not about changing that person's mind. It's about everyone who's reading this. I was befriended on Facebook by the choir director of one of my students, the high school choir director of one of my college students, who happened to be, the student was African-American, the choir director was not. And he made just a frankly racist comment on his own Facebook page about music, about rap music, and how it was destroying society. And I was really uncomfortable with it. And I thought, I'm probably not going to change his mind about this, but I don't think I could live with myself if my student scrolls past this, knowing that I saw it and knowing that I didn't stand up to it. So I made a comment, not to change somebody's mind, but because I felt it was going to change me in some unpleasant way if I didn't at least say, hey, we don't all think that way, and that's not okay. So call it out, even when it's uncomfortable. Make space. I talked about Virginia Woolf and her strong conviction that the creativity of women, or I would say really any marginalized or historically underprivileged group, you gotta have a place, a physical space, a creative space, a place that you occupy, a place of honor that you occupy in a society that says that your voice is as valuable as whoever's traditionally been in charge. That can be uncomfortable because sometimes it means you're a member of the dominant group and you actually have to step back and make a place for somebody else at the table. And boy, that's hard to do. If you're, and I've had this experience or seen friends and colleagues do this, where like they were invited to be on a panel and they're like, yay, I'd really like to do that. That's really exciting. I want to be part of that. It's an honor. And then they found out that every single member of the panel was white. And they did something really, I think, brave and important, which was they said, you know what, I'd like to be on this panel in the future, but this time I would like to give up my space to a person of color because I think it's important that this panel represent more of the diversity of whatever field it's answering to. Sometimes, and this is hard, but sometimes being a real ally means sacrificing something. It means giving up things that are important to you. It might even mean giving up things that you deserve, that you have earned, because you recognize that someone else didn't have the same chance to earn it that you did, or because it's more important to you to say, you know what, someone's going to be watching this who needs to see a face that looks like theirs in this realm, on this panel, in this conference, on this concert. So I'm going to be the one to give up my space. And by the way, when you do that, you don't need cookies for it. Don't ask people to applaud you for being a hero and giving up your space. Just do it. It's hard, but find a time when you can do that. And finally, just, working toward equality in the music world or the anything world, any, subset of our society, our culture, means working for equality in the world beyond. We will never, this is a whole other talk and it gets real unmusical, but we want, say, women to have equality in the music world, women need to have equality in the healthcare world. They need to have equality that says that, you know, parental leave is available to everybody equally. They need to have equal division of housework at home if they're in a partnership, right? There are studies that say that even in households that think that they're totally equal in terms of like household chores, they find that the women on average have something like 5 fewer hours a week of free time because they're doing that much more of the housework. I think that's astonishing. And they don't, most of them, you know, they and their partners don't even realize that's happening usually, because it seems like it's equal, but it's not really. And that's 5 hours. Think about how much music you could write in 5 hours a week. You could do a lot with that time. So look for those things, be aware, don't let it get you down. Don't let it ruin your enjoyment of music. Let it inspire your enjoyment of music, and let it make, I have said several times here that, you know, I got into music just because I so loved the sound of Bach and Brahms, and that is right. But I've realized more and more the older I get, I got into music to be a better citizen of the world through music, and these are ways I can do that. 7:02, sorry, I talked 2 minutes too long. Anyone want to say stuff or ask things or any of that?
So we can stick around for a little bit if anybody has any questions, but I just wanted to sort of button this by saying thank you for coming and talking about these things. These are all incredibly important and incredibly relevant things in our field and beyond. And it's wonderful to hear somebody talk about them so passionately and so eloquently, because there's, as I mentioned to all of the guys that I have in my program, it's really important for you guys to be here because I can't talk about what it's like to be a woman because I've never been one. So I'm really, really grateful to have you as a colleague, and to hear you speak is always exciting as it is frustrating. And I appreciate you sharing your Facebook comments. I happen to know, having read some of those discussions, you definitely picked and cherry picked the ones that were appropriate for a high school audience. So thank you for doing that. So thank you so much for being here. For those of you guys who are watching, you're free to go at this point. But if you have any questions, I know that Eliza wouldn't mind waiting around to answer any of your questions. So
I've got at least 10 minutes if anyone wants them.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. We have lots of thank yous from the YouTube as well.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. Come to OCC. Someday we'll be back in, you know, in like real choir, and we have a really great choral program there, and we have so much fun.
Yay. All right. Looks like we don't have too many questions popping up, just lots of appreciations. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it down. But thank you guys so much. Come back on Friday for our social distance symphony. And in 2 weeks, we'll have Stacey Gibbs here to talk about African-American spirituals and its impact on current happenings. So thank you all so much for being here. And we hope to see you back again soon.